Welcome to this video, where we will delve deeply into the topic of intermittent fasting, a dietary strategy that has gained significant popularity in recent years. Today, we will explore not only what intermittent fasting entails but also its different methods, such as the 16-8 and 5-2 protocols, and their potential benefits for metabolic health, weight loss, and even longevity. Before we begin, it's crucial to remember that not all nutritional strategies work the same for everyone. Each person has a unique metabolism, specific needs, medical history, and varied responses. This video is for informational purposes only and does not replace an individualized consultation with a healthcare professional. If you are considering incorporating intermittent fasting into your life, I recommend consulting your trusted doctor or nutritionist beforehand, especially if you have a chronic condition, are on medication, or have a history of eating disorders. That being said, let's start by breaking down the general concept of intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is not a conventional diet, in the sense that it does not dictate what foods to eat but rather when to eat them. Simply put, it involves alternating specific periods of fasting, where calorie intake is limited or avoided, with periods of normal eating. These fasting windows can vary in duration and frequency, and these variations have given rise to different protocols, strategies, and approaches. Two of the most popular and widely studied protocols are 16-8 and 5-2. The 16-8 fasting method involves fasting for 16 consecutive hours and concentrating meals within an 8-hour window. For example, a person might have dinner early at 8 p.m., skip breakfast, and have their first meal of the day around noon, thus maintaining an extended overnight fasting period. On the other hand, the 5-2 strategy entails eating normally for 5 days of the week and restricting caloric intake, typically to about 500 to 600 calories, on the other two non-consecutive days. Each of these methods has slightly different foundations and can be tailored to an individual's needs and goals. Later on, we'll delve into the specifics of each strategy, their potential benefits, and the physiological mechanisms involved. For now, it's enough to grasp the general idea of what intermittent fasting is and some of its best-known variations. Throughout this video, we will also address myths, precautions, and practical tips so that, if you decide to try it, you can do so in an informed and safe manner. Let's explore the metabolic and physiological principles that support intermittent fasting. To understand why this eating pattern can offer benefits beyond mere weight loss, it's essential to understand how our body manages energy, especially when we enter a fasting state. When we eat, our insulin levels rise in response to the presence of nutrients in the bloodstream, particularly glucose. Insulin is a key hormone that regulates energy storage, promoting glucose uptake into cells to be used as energy or stored as glycogen in the liver and muscles. However, excess insulin in the bloodstream can lead to increased fat storage as the body begins to store more energy than it needs. When fasting, insulin levels drop, and the body enters a different state, one in which it becomes more efficient at utilizing stored energy, primarily through glycogen and fat. During prolonged fasting, glycogen, the stored form of glucose in the liver, is depleted, and the body begins to break down fat stores into fatty acids and ketone bodies, which are then converted into energy. This fasting adaptation process helps improve insulin sensitivity, meaning the body becomes more efficient and less reliant on insulin to regulate glucose levels. Studies have shown that improved insulin sensitivity can positively affect the prevention of conditions like type 2 diabetes. One reason intermittent fasting can be so effective for weight loss is that it limits the number of hours during which a person can eat, often leading to a natural reduction in calorie intake. Furthermore, by improving fat metabolism, the body starts to use its reserves more efficiently, facilitating fat loss without compromising muscle mass. But that's not the only advantage. As we enter fasting, the body also activates cellular repair processes. Fasting promotes an increase in autophagy, a cellular recycling mechanism that helps eliminate damaged or dysfunctional components, fostering cellular regeneration and tissue repair. This is linked to longevity, as these processes have been shown to reduce the risk of age-related diseases such as neurodegenerative disorders and certain types of cancer. For those interested in not just losing weight but also improving metabolic health and extending lifespan, understanding these processes is essential. Intermittent fasting is not simply a diet, but a strategy that, by altering the timing of food consumption, also changes how our body manages energy and cellular repair. As you'll see, the benefits of intermittent fasting go far beyond weight reduction. Now, let's dive deeper into the metabolic logic behind this strategy to understand why fasting can offer benefits that surpass simple calorie restriction or weight loss. The key lies in the interaction between our hormones, energy reserves, and how our body responds to the temporary absence of food. To start, it's essential to understand the central role of insulin, a hormone produced by the pancreas that allows glucose, primarily derived from carbohydrates, to enter cells. When we eat, blood glucose levels rise, and insulin works to distribute it to the tissues that need it. Some of this glucose is used immediately for energy, while the excess is stored as glycogen in the liver and muscles or converted into fat to be stored in adipose tissue. During fasting periods, the situation changes significantly. Without the constant influx of glucose into the bloodstream, insulin levels decrease. With less circulating insulin, the body looks for alternative energy sources. It first turns to glycogen stored in the liver and muscles. These reserves typically last a few hours, depending on the person's physical activity level and muscle mass. Once glycogen is depleted, the body begins to use body fat as the primary energy source. In other words, prolonged fasting causes the body to shift towards burning fat, releasing fatty acids into the bloodstream and converting them into ketone bodies that can fuel both the brain and other tissues. This metabolic shift can have significant effects. By keeping insulin levels low for longer periods, long-term insulin sensitivity is improved. This is especially relevant for individuals with insulin resistance or prediabetes, as enhanced sensitivity can help regulate blood glucose levels and potentially reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Additionally, intermittent fasting can stimulate cellular maintenance processes such as autophagy. Autophagy is a mechanism where cells degrade and recycle damaged or unnecessary components, contributing to greater cellular longevity and protection against chronic diseases. When the body is deprived of nutrients for a certain period, autophagy is activated more intensely, aiding in cellular cleansing and repair. Intermittent fasting can also regulate other important hormones, such as growth hormone, GH, which tends to increase during fasting. GH helps preserve muscle mass and promote fat utilization, benefiting body composition. However, it's worth noting that these effects don't occur overnight. Consistency, the type of fasting, and individual adaptation all play a key role. Now that we have a clearer understanding of how intermittent fasting works metabolically, let's dive into specific strategies. Let's start with the 16-8 protocol, undoubtedly one of the most popular. This method involves limiting the eating period to 8 hours a day and fasting for the remaining 16. For example, one could eat between noon and 8 p.m., then fast from 8 p.m. to noon the next day. This schedule is appealing to beginners because a significant portion of the fasting period occurs during sleep, reducing the subjective feeling of hunger. Moreover, the 16-8 method does not require extreme restrictions or excessive calorie counting. It simply involves eating normally, ideally focusing on healthy foods during the eating window. On the other hand, the 5-2 protocol offers a slightly different approach. In this case, individuals eat normally for 5 days a week and restrict calories, usually to around 500 to 600 daily, on the remaining 2 non-consecutive days. For example, one could eat normally from Monday to Friday and then significantly reduce intake on Saturday and the following Tuesday. The idea behind this strategy is to create a significant weekly caloric deficit without experiencing daily deprivation. While adjusting to these more restrictive days may be challenging initially, some people find it convenient to concentrate their efforts on just a couple of days a week rather than adhering to strict daily schedules. Is there evidence to support these strategies? Research in this field is still expanding, but several studies have shown that intermittent fasting can improve key metabolic markers. For example, some studies indicate that the 16-8 fasting method can enhance insulin sensitivity and help reduce waist circumference, an indirect marker of visceral fat. Similarly, the 5-2 approach has demonstrated improvements in blood pressure, cholesterol, triglyceride levels, and body composition. There is also preliminary evidence suggesting that these methods may support cognitive health and healthy aging. Animal studies indicate that intermittent fasting could improve brain function, neuronal plasticity, and the body's ability to repair damaged DNA. While more human studies are needed to confirm these findings, the prospects are promising. It's important to note that these two protocols are not mutually exclusive. Some individuals may start with the 16-8 method for several weeks to adapt to fasting, then try the 5-2 approach later, or vice versa. The choice depends on personal preferences, lifestyle, and goals. For instance, someone with a job that requires regular mealtimes might prefer the 16-8 method, while someone with a more flexible schedule might opt for 5-2. In any case, the initial adjustment period may take days or even weeks, and it's normal to experience some challenges while the body adapts. Now that we've explored different intermittent fasting strategies, their metabolic foundations, and the emerging scientific support, let's address the practical side. After all, no matter how appealing the proposed benefits are, if intermittent fasting cannot be reasonably and healthily integrated into daily life, it's unlikely to be adopted long-term. One common challenge when starting intermittent fasting is managing hunger. During the first days, or even weeks, your body, accustomed to receiving fuel frequently, may protest the absence of a meal at its usual time. It's important to distinguish between physiological and psychological hunger. Physiological hunger often presents with clear signals, such as a hollow feeling in the stomach, weakness, or lack of focus. In contrast, psychological hunger arises when we see a food commercial, smell something appetizing, or feel stressed. Over time, the body adapts, and the sensation of hunger usually diminishes, especially when consistent fasting schedules are maintained. A helpful tip is to stay hydrated. Water, unsweetened teas, and black coffee, in moderation, are fasting-friendly allies, and ensure that during the eating window, you consume nutrient-rich foods, fiber, lean proteins, healthy fats, and essential micronutrients. This will help maintain satiety and sustain energy for longer periods. Another important point is fatigue, which some people experience during fasting. Metabolic adaptation takes time, and feeling a bit more tired in the early stages is normal. However, this sensation typically improves as the body becomes more efficient at using fat reserves and balancing energy metabolism. If fatigue is intense or prolonged, it's a sign to reevaluate the method. Perhaps the fasting window is too long, or the caloric deficit too extreme. Adjusting the eating hours, opting for a less aggressive protocol, like shifting from 16-8 to 14-10, or slightly increasing caloric intake on reduced calorie days might be helpful strategies. Food anxiety may also arise. Some individuals fear losing control during the eating window, overeating, and paradoxically sabotaging their goals. To manage this anxiety, it's advisable to plan quality meals in advance, avoiding ultra-processed foods rich in sugars and refined flours that can cause glucose and insulin spikes, exacerbating hunger. Knowing that you'll break your fast with a nutritious, tasty, and satisfying meal often reduces anxiety. Additionally, maintaining a flexible attitude is helpful. Intermittent fasting should not be seen as a rigid obligation. If specific social commitments, family events, or work circumstances make it difficult to adhere to a fasting schedule on a particular day, it's better to adapt and resume the strategy the next day. Long-term consistency is more valuable than short-term perfection. Of course, there are precautions. Individuals with specific medical conditions, such as type 1 diabetes, advanced kidney failure, eating disorders, or women who are pregnant or breastfeeding, must be extremely cautious and seek medical advice before implementing intermittent fasting. Additionally, those taking certain medications dependent on meal schedules or that may cause hypoglycemia require professional supervision. Intermittent fasting, as natural as it may seem, is not a one-size-fits-all solution for every body or condition. At this stage, we've covered some of the most common challenges in practicing intermittent fasting, as well as strategies and precautions that can help ease the process. This provides a clearer framework for tackling initial difficulties, understanding your body's signals, and respecting your limits. So far, we've reviewed the nature of intermittent fasting, its metabolic foundation, common strategies, and practical recommendations. Now, let's take it a step further and analyze the potential benefits of intermittent fasting in preventing chronic diseases, improving long-term metabolic health, and its influence on longevity. When we talk about metabolic health, we refer to the body's ability to maintain optimal levels of blood sugar, lipids, and other markers, thereby reducing the risk of conditions such as type 2 diabetes, obesity, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease. How can intermittent fasting contribute to this? As previously mentioned, this dietary approach promotes insulin sensitivity, a key factor in preventing metabolic syndrome. Better blood sugar control means fewer spikes and crashes, reducing oxidative stress and low-grade chronic inflammation. These two factors are particularly relevant because systemic inflammation and oxidative damage are linked to an increased risk of chronic diseases, including cardiovascular disease and certain types of cancer. Beyond insulin sensitivity, intermittent fasting can also influence gut microbiota composition. Although research in this field is still in its early stages, some studies suggest that regular fasting periods can promote the growth of beneficial bacteria and improve intestinal mucosa integrity. This, in turn, could contribute to a more balanced immune response and lower levels of systemic inflammation. As for longevity, much of the evidence comes from animal studies, particularly in rodents and, more recently, in primates. These studies indicate that restricting caloric intake in general, and, by extension, implementing fasting periods, can extend lifespan and delay the onset of age-related diseases. Proposed mechanisms include the stimulation of autophagy, better DNA maintenance, reduced oxidative stress, and the positive regulation of certain molecular pathways involved in aging, such as the sirtuin and insulin-like growth factor, IGF-1, pathways. Although evidence in humans is still developing, preliminary findings are promising. Small clinical studies have shown that intermittent fasting can improve markers associated with longevity, such as reducing inflammation, lowering oxidative stress, and stabilizing certain hormonal markers. Combined with its positive impact on weight control and metabolic health, intermittent fasting appears to be a potentially valuable tool for aging with better quality of life. However, it's essential to remain realistic. While projections based on animal studies and preliminary human data are encouraging, we still lack large-scale, long-term trials to conclusively confirm its direct impact on human longevity. Genetics, lifestyle, physical activity, diet quality, stress management, and other environmental factors also play a crucial role. Intermittent fasting alone is not a magic bullet against aging or disease. Rather, it is a piece of a more complex puzzle that includes healthy eating habits, regular exercise, quality sleep, and enriching social connections. At this point, we've reviewed the metabolic foundation of intermittent fasting, the most common modalities, and their potential benefits. However, as intermittent fasting gains popularity, many myths, doubts, and claims have emerged, potentially confusing the public. In this section, we'll address some frequently asked questions, debunk myths, and put the information into context. One of the most recurring myths is that intermittent fasting slows down metabolism. This belief stems from the idea that going many hours without eating would cause the body to enter starvation mode and begin burning fewer calories. While it's true that extremely restrictive diets over the long term can lower basal metabolic rate, intermittent fasting, when practiced correctly, is not necessarily associated with a significant reduction in energy expenditure. In fact, many studies indicate that short and controlled fasting periods can even maintain or improve body composition. The key is not to confuse intermittent fasting with chronic starvation. The former is a strategic and temporary tool, while the latter is prolonged nutrient deprivation. Another common question is whether intermittent fasting requires cutting out entire food groups. The answer is no. Intermittent fasting is not a diet in terms of food selection but a temporal eating pattern. This means that during the eating window, you can consume a wide variety of nutrients. Of course, to maximize the benefits, it's advisable to choose whole foods rich in fiber, high-quality proteins, healthy fats, and micronutrients. While it's possible to lose weight with intermittent fasting without focusing too much on diet quality, long-term metabolic health and disease prevention will largely depend on the quality of the foods you consume. A frequent concern is whether intermittent fasting could trigger eating disorders. While individuals with a history of eating disorders should be extremely cautious, and preferably avoid these practices without professional supervision, most people do not develop eating disorders due to intermittent fasting. In fact, some individuals report an improved relationship with food, learning to distinguish real hunger from emotional appetite. That said, it's crucial to be honest with yourself. If you notice that intermittent fasting causes obsession, excessive anxiety, or disordered eating behaviors, it's better to stop and seek professional guidance. Another common question is whether coffee, tea, or sweeteners are allowed during fasting. Generally, water, black coffee, and unsweetened tea are considered permitted. during fasting since they contain very few or no calories and do not significantly disrupt the metabolic fasting state. However, adding milk, cream, or caloric sweeteners could break the fast. As for non-caloric sweeteners, there is some debate. Some studies suggest they might subtly influence insulin response, but their impact is likely minimal. Ideally, fasting should be kept as clean as possible, but small additions of non-caloric sweeteners occasionally are usually not a major issue for most people. Finally, one last clarification. Intermittent fasting does not replace the importance of exercise, good sleep, and proper stress management. It's often believed that fasting alone is enough to achieve optimal health, but a holistic lifestyle is the key. Regular exercise, both aerobic and strength training, strengthens the cardiovascular system, improves insulin sensitivity, and preserves muscle mass. Quality sleep supports hormonal regulation, recovery, and mental well-being. Managing stress avoids chronic cortisol production, which can undermine many of the metabolic benefits of fasting. We've covered a lot of ground in this video. From the initial concept of intermittent fasting, through its physiological foundation and the most well-known modalities, such as 16-8 and 5-2, to the preliminary evidence suggesting benefits in metabolic health, body composition, chronic disease prevention, and potentially longevity. We also addressed the practical side of its implementation, how to cope with hunger, initial fatigue, food anxiety, and necessary precautions. Finally, we debunked some common myths and clarified that intermittent fasting is neither an obligation nor a panacea but simply one more option among the array of nutritional strategies. At this point, it's essential to emphasize individualization. What works wonderfully for one person, due to their lifestyle, body composition, genetics, food preferences, work or family schedule, may be a significant challenge or even counterproductive for someone else. Intermittent fasting is not a guaranteed recipe for success but rather a tool that, when used wisely, can yield positive results. As with any other eating pattern, it's advisable to experiment cautiously. Listen to your body's signals and, above all, seek the guidance of a qualified health professional when necessary. Remember, the key to long-term health is not limited to a single strategy. Beyond intermittent fasting, maintaining a nutrient-rich, balanced diet, engaging in regular physical activity, getting good sleep, and effectively managing stress are foundational pillars. Combining these habits can amplify the positive impact of any dietary approach, including intermittent fasting. Moreover, keeping a flexible mindset and understanding that there will be days and situations where adhering to fasting windows is easier or harder is part of a sustainable lifestyle. Rigidity and perfectionism are poor advisors when it comes to food and health. Looking ahead, it's reasonable to expect that scientific evidence will continue to evolve. As more studies are conducted with greater methodological rigor and over the long term, we'll better understand who benefits most from intermittent fasting, under what conditions, and how to optimally integrate it into a global health plan. In the coming years, new modalities, more personalized adaptations, or synergies with other approaches, such as chrononutrition-based diets or integration with specific exercise plans, may emerge. In summary, intermittent fasting is a promising tool, with solid physiological foundations and preliminary data suggesting improvements in metabolic health, weight control, chronic disease prevention, and even aspects potentially related to healthy aging. However, it is neither a magic formula nor an obligation. The decision to adopt it, or not, should be based on reliable information, self-observation, patience, and, in case of doubt, professional advice. This concludes our journey through intermittent fasting. I hope this overview has given you a deeper understanding, helped you discern between solid information and myths, and left you feeling better prepared to decide whether this strategy can be part of your own journey toward better health. Thank you for joining me until the end. See you next time. This video is for informational purposes only and does not replace professional medical advice. Always consult your doctor for specific guidance regarding your situation.